This is a program from the Waupaca Area Public Library.
Welcome to the library's cooking class series. We had talked about doing a cooking on a budget class in conjunction with the exhibit, as we said, and I was told I could shop at the dollar store, at Aldi, and at Pick and Save. Come on in. And so that's what I did. I didn't shop anywhere else, and I tell you, I got some amazing things. I mean, this is a pepper mill. You can grind it at the dollar store. It's fantastic. And if you can get this for $1, as opposed to maybe $3 or $4 for a little can of pre-ground pepper, this is going to taste so much better. Because for me, I wanted to not just cook inexpensively, but in a healthy and flavorful way. That was really important. Because anybody can buy a packet of ramen noodles and put the seasoning thing in and you're done. And actually, you'll see it in the recipe thing. I didn't make ramen noodles today, but I've been making them at home for practice without the packet, but just using like chicken broth and vegetables, and so good, so good. Just very, very messy to eat, which is why I didn't do it today. Yeah, the whole idea was try to use things that are inexpensive, but in a healthy and flavorful way. So this is the basis for stir fry right now, because using rice is a great way, stir fry in general, but rice in general is a great way to have use a little bit of vegetables, a little bit of meat. You can see I've got maybe a cup of chicken here, but this is going to be enough to feed 4 anyway for dinner. So it's a great way to either use leftovers or stretch your budget as far as that stuff goes. And you can also scramble some eggs and put those in there too. I didn't do that this time because I don't have 2 burners. But I would recommend using brown rice when you can. That's what I'm going to use because it's much healthier. And what I do is make a huge thing of brown rice and put it in a Ziploc bag and flatten it out and then leave it in the freezer. Or it's just me and my husband at home, so I do it in much smaller bags. But and then to thaw it, put the sealed bag in like a pan, pour hot water over it, and it's pretty much ready to go. And so that way, because brown rice takes a while to cook, you can do it once a month or whatever, make an enormous amount, and then it's in your freezer and ready to go. I also will use brown rice. I made stuffed peppers the other day. That's with rice as the basis, and some chopped up veggies and cheese. It's Wisconsin. As a matter of fact, this is the first time I think I've ever cooked 3 things with no cheese. I don't know. This is very rare for me. Yeah, stuffed peppers are great too, and I like to actually, most people cut the tops off and put them in. Well, you can get a lot more filling if you cut them in half sideways and flip them over that way, if you're big on the whole delicious filling stuff. Yes? I do sometimes, yes, because it is fast. And this time I was trying to really cook on a budget, so I kept that in mind, and I just did it in a pot on the stove. But yes, if you have an Instant Pot, it's great for rice. So, and I often do, and this isn't really budget friendly because wild rice is expensive, but wild rice and brown rice take the same amount of time to cook, and wild rice is delicious and nutty and nutritious. So a lot of times I'll do half wild rice and half brown rice, and same technique, just freeze it in bags like that. But yes, the Instant Pot is a great thing for that too. But rice is always a good thing. Pasta, it's also another way to really stretch your budget. If you can get whole grain pasta, I actually like it better now. I mean, we started doing it because it's healthier, but I actually prefer the taste and texture. It's a little harder to cook to mush. You know what I mean? It maintains the texture better, and you can mix just about anything in with pasta. And one of my favorite techniques that I picked up from, I think, a cooking magazine a million years ago is saute your vegetables, because I always start with onions and garlic and then decide what I'm going to make for dinner, because they basically will flavor anything. But cook your onions, your garlic, whatever other vegetables you're going to put in, and before you add any liquid, sprinkle flour over the top of it and stir it, and that makes what's called a roux. Have you heard of a roux? Yeah. But it makes it right in the pan, and then you add liquid, and it automatically thickens. So you're not making a separate pot for a separate sauce. You can use that technique for anything. I mean, that's my, like, I have half a chicken breast and a stalk of broccoli, so this is what I'm going to do for dinner. It's fast and easy and a great technique. And my husband likes cream sauce kind of things, but I use just whole milk and of course cheese. Can't eat without cheese. But although today we will be trying that. Was going to say brown rice, beans. We're going to be having some refried beans today too. Dried beans can be intimidating. I didn't even really cook with them much until recently, and I started using, because the Instant Pot, you can cook dried beans in, I mean, I think under pressure, like 6 minutes. It's ridiculous. But they can be intimidating because it's sort of like bread. It's not hard to do, but it's a lot of time involved. It's best if you soak beans. For a couple of reasons. It makes them much easier to cook, and you can see the difference once you soak them, what they look like. Makes them easier to cook. They're going to get more tender, and they will be less embarrassing after you eat them. Let me put it that way. And there are two methods. This is in your packet there too, but there are two methods for soaking. You can soak overnight, where you put them in a big bowl, and they will absorb a lot of water. So you put 2 or 3 inches of just cold or room temperature water over them and let them sit on the counter overnight, and or in the morning, and then you're going to cook them at night, whatever, but 8, 12 hours, doesn't matter. And then you drain that water and give them a quick rinse and then cook them. The other way, if you forget to do it ahead of time, this is the first time I actually did soak overnight. I usually forget, so I do the fast way, which is put them in a big pot, again, a couple inches of water over it, bring it to a hard boil, boil for 2 minutes, and then shut it off and let it sit for an hour. And then drain again and rinse, and you can cook. So that's a little faster. And beans, the other slightly tricky thing with beans is you never know how long they're going to take. It depends on the kind of bean, how old they are, because of course dried beans keep forever. They don't go stale, but they will take longer to cook if they're older, and if it's hard to know, unless you're growing them yourself, how old they are. But so I did kidney beans, and I started at 40 minutes and then just kept tasting to see. And the batch I had took 55 minutes, I think. But also you can freeze those the same way you freeze the rice. I didn't know this. Liz, our exhibit director, is the one who told me that, and that was another reason that I didn't really cook them, because you end up with a huge amount. But they freeze beautifully, the cooked beans. Just put them in a Ziploc bag, flatten them again, and the flattening is just so they'll thaw quickly, and then throw them in. And so I have packets of black beans in my freezer now, and we just did refrieds at home the other day. But beans are ridiculously healthy. They're so good for you. They're protein, there's nutrients, and they're also ridiculously cheap. So it's a really good thing to have on hand. And you can throw them in anything. I mean, obviously chilies. I know there's a no bean chili contingent out there, but I am not part of that contingent. I love the beans, and my husband and I do also refrieds really fast. We like to do that for dinner. And canned beans obviously work just as well, but always rinse before you cook. But and refrieds you can use with rice and beans together make one protein, so you don't need meat. Huevos rancheros, put a little refrieds on a tortilla, and put an egg on top and some cheese and maybe some hot sauce. Oh, so good. And we like that for dinner sometimes, actually. Excuse me. Um, there are just a ton of ways to use beans in soup. Beans are great in soup. So that's something that's very inexpensive and nutritious. And I like to, when thinking of healthy eating, as I said with ramen, throw out the packet. You know, the pre-seasoning stuff and the pre-made stuff is the stuff that's not really going to be good for us. And there are ways to do it from scratch that are not very expensive, to add tons of flavor to stuff from scratch that are not very expensive. As I said, this is a peppermill that I got at the dollar store. That's so amazing. They have sea salt at the dollar store. And there's, you know, people have different theories about salt. But that basic salt that we all grew up with, a diamond crystal salt or whatever, has a lot of iodine in it, which I think is, our bodies need some iodine, but it also has a much sharper taste, and you can taste the difference. And so I like to use sea salt. It's a cleaner taste, and it's not as strong, it's not as salty, so it's easier to adjust. And I also never use a salt shaker, because you don't know how much is coming out, you know? If you just shake so I have a bowl and next to my stove, and I just pinch out what I need and do it that way. This is the Aldi version of Mrs. Dash. I normally don't talk brands, but we all know Mrs. Dash, right? You all know Mrs. Dash. They have a whole range of seasonings, and they're salt-free, which is really nice because you can adjust the salt yourself. But Mrs. Dash on anything is great. I use that all the time. I also wanted to talk about, as I said, my favorites, onions and garlic. Onions are really cheap. They're easy to use. I have yet to really find a good way to chop onions without my eyes all tearing up. And if I find out, I'll let you know. But onions are worth it. You also, if you are not big on choppy, you can chop a whole big pile of onions one day and freeze those too. And they're fine. Garlic is very cheap because it's like, I don't know, $3 a pound, but you could fill this 5 times over with a pound of garlic. It doesn't weigh anything. So, you know, an entire head of garlic is a few cents. If you don't want the mess of fresh garlic chopping and all that, the chopped garlic in a jar is also cheap and will last forever in your refrigerator. That stuff is great, and it just adds so much flavor. And there are uses for things like garlic powder and garlic salt, but I wouldn't use them in place of real garlic. That's more for like marinades or dry rubs or whatever. But you can't go wrong with real garlic. And this is kind of I brought a little tiny piece. This is fresh ginger. You can buy that at the grocery store too. And you use so little of it at a time that, and this is a tiny piece, but I leave it in my freezer. And never thought, and I take it out and chop it, or if you have one of these babies or any kind of grater, you can grate it. It adds a huge amount of flavor, and it will last for years in the freezer, unless your husband throws it out. My husband says he doesn't like ginger, and so every once in a while he finds it and throws it out, and I have to go buy more. But seasonings like that make a huge difference when you're on a budget, because it can add a whole lot of flavor for not much money. And if you have a sunny windowsill, you can grow your own herbs, and they will. And then for just the cost of some seeds and a little dirt. I don't have a sunny windowsill, but I do grow herbs on my deck all the time in the summer. And you can also regrow scallions, green onions. Did you know about this trick? You take the root end, the white part, with the little roots in, about 2 inches tall or whatever, stick them in a glass of water so the roots are covered with water, and they grow. They send out green shoots really pretty fast, and you can keep them going for a really long time. What else, Laura, can you do with? Oh, yeah. 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 Wow. Wow. Yeah, and I grew lettuce this summer too. Um, I bought a couple little little seedlings, little beginning things. And if you're growing lettuce, yeah, I don't know if you could do that indoors in the winter unless you have a really sunny place. But in the summer, it's very easy to grow. And you just cut the leaves off and you leave the base there, and it just keeps growing new leaves like almost all summer. Fantastic. Yeah, it's a garden waiting for you out there. Um, so with this stir fry, you can use all, again, it's like leftovers, whatever veggies you have. Today I did cabbage and carrots and onions and garlic, obviously, and some ginger. And I'm going to put some peas in, just frozen peas. And they don't even, they're thawed now because I didn't bring them in a cooler, but you don't even have to thaw them because frozen vegetables are already cooked. You don't have to boil them for 10 minutes or whatever. You just need to warm them, essentially. So I'm going to put some peas in here, too. And you can, as I said, you can put in whatever veggies you have. Water chestnuts are fun for crunch. The little can of water chestnuts chopped up in here. I go by Chef Chu's because I think they have fabulous fried rice. So I like to use that as a base. I put a little bit of chicken stock, Aldi's, in. Just it adds a lot of flavor and it keeps it from being too dry, but you don't need too much. And then soy sauce, dollar store. Yes.
So with the chicken broth, I find that I will buy a container like that.
Yep.
I'll use just a little bit. How long? It says 7 days. You have 7 days, I think, to use it.
I usually do like 2 weeks. I also, when I open one, I write the date on the front from when I opened it. You also can freeze these in an ice cube tray, which is really nice if you frequently find you need half a cup. You don't need much. I use ice cube trays for everything except ice cubes because we have an ice maker on our refrigerator. But I used to do that all the time, and that way, and freeze them in an ice cube tray, pop the chicken broth ice cubes out, and put them in a Ziploc bag. I don't like using plastic, but Ziploc bags, I haven't found a better use yet. And then you can just pull out a couple and add that. I also do that with pesto in the summer. As I said, I grow my own herbs and I make pesto, and I always freeze that in ice cube trays and then put those in bags. And when my son was in college in Madison, I used to bring down bags of pesto ice cubes because he loves to cook and he loves pesto, and didn't really have the resources to make his own. Now he lives in Portland, Oregon, so it's really hard to ship frozen pesto that far. Yeah, ice cube trays are great, and I also make my own stock. Not always, but it's very easy to do, and it's again a frugal thing. If you roast a chicken or you cook chicken, especially on the bone, anything on the bone, save the bones, save any little parts you're not going to eat, and throw them in a Ziploc bag. Another Ziploc bag, a big one like this, in your freezer. When you're chopping onions, when you're peeling garlic, when you're peeling carrots, as long as those peels are clean, they can go in the bag too. And that's also something I learned fairly recently. And I like to buy parsley. It's not very expensive. And if you treat it like a bouquet of flowers where you trim the ends and shove it in a glass of water, it'll last at least a week on your kitchen counter. You don't even have to put it in the refrigerator. And those parsley stems are great in stock. So I just keep doing that. Rotisserie chicken, I save all the scraps that my dogs are not stealing from me while I go, and then you just put all that stuff in when your bag's full, put it in a pot, barely cover it with water because you want a lot of flavor, and then cook it for a minimum of 2 hours, I would say. Bring it to a boil and then let it simmer. And never add salt because You may want to use chicken broth or a stock that you cook way down later, and that would just intensify the salt. So never add salt, but you can add pepper, bay leaves, other herbs if you want. But cook that for, a friend of mine does it in the oven on 250 overnight, and which makes his wife very nervous that the oven is on overnight. I don't do it that way. But, and also the Instant Pot is amazing for stock if you have an Instant Pot. But just basically any big pot will do. Throw it in, barely cover with water, cook uncovered. Once it comes to a boil, put it down to a simmer, cook uncovered, and the longer you cook it, the better the flavor. So, and then I put that in jars, not Ziploc bags, in my freezer. And that way you have great broth or stock right away. I can never remember what the difference between broth and stock is. I think there's some debate, actually, what the difference is. But at any rate, you can do the same. If you like beef broth, you can do the same thing. Beef bones, whatever. And I actually called Piggly Wiggly and talked to the butcher there to see if you could get things like chicken backs and necks to make stock out of, but he said it was actually a special order and it was as expensive as buying regular chicken. So I don't know if Nemeth's maybe does that, possibly, where you could get just bones and things. I know you can buy bones for, like beef bones for soup, that are pretty inexpensive, and you can do that way too. Also, if you can obviously make broth from raw chicken, where you put a whole chicken in, or you always want bones, but bones in. I would brown stuff first, just because again, browning is flavor. So if you did it with that, I would brown first. But stock is your friend. That's what I used with these ramen noodles when I threw out the packet. I had made some chicken stock that day and cooked it so it was really rich, and just chopped up actually I used leftover veggies from the night before, leftover broccoli and green beans, and with, of course, onions and garlic and a little ginger in that case. Threw it all in with the noodles and cooked the noodles in the broth, and my husband said, you can make this 3 days a week. This is so good. And it's ramen. What is it, 10 packets for $1 or something? But as long as you throw away that horrible seasoning packet, which is nothing but chemicals, you can do all sorts of fun things with it. Okay, I'm going to taste this, but I have clean tasting forks so that I don't contaminate anything. And I always do this when I taste. I don't know why. I put my hand behind my back. I think Julia Child used to do it, and I don't even realize I'm doing it. Needs more moisture, needs more flavor. We were talking about training or not. I don't have any formal training in cooking at all. Although I've been a cookbook editor for 25 years. But I started watching Julia Child when I was, 12 maybe younger. And my husband and son and I used to watch Julia Child and Jacques Pepin. They had a show together. And Jacques Pepin is French, and he has a very heavy accent, and they always close, and Julia Child was obviously American, trained in France, but they always close the show. Well, he would say, "Happy cooking," and she would say, "Bon appetit." And so that's my husband's and my greeting to each other. One of us says, "Happy cooking," and the other says, "Bon appetit." And he texted me this morning, "Happy cooking, Jacques Pepin," so I texted him back. Yeah. And that is mostly where I've learned, is just lots of TV, lots of reading, and lots of experimenting. There's nothing wrong with, I encourage you, if you are reading a recipe and it says you need parsnips. Well, if you don't have parsnips and you don't want to buy parsnips, use carrots. What does it matter? Experiment and play around with your food. I know you can't do that with baking, really. Baking is very specific in measurements, which is why I'm a really terrible baker. But the but you can with cooking. I mean, and if it doesn't turn out great, unless you're feeding 20 people, what does it matter? You know what? You learn something. So I really encourage experimenting. And yeah, you see frozen peas from Aldi, straight from the packet. They don't need to cook. I know I keep walking away.
And yes, you can turn the heat off early before you add the peas because you're using a cast iron, right? And it
That's true. The cast iron really holds the heat. This is, yeah, we're definitely going to do a cast iron class down the road. And actually, that's another budget thing that I would suggest because cast iron is heavenly to cook in. And this one I got at a garage sale, and it was a rusted mess. Looked horrible. And it's cast iron, so it doesn't matter. It takes a little elbow grease. I used steel wool to get every bit of rust off, and then you season it by rubbing it with a little oil. And this is all online. They will all tell you different ways of doing it. One place said, you rub every surface with oil. I use grapeseed oil myself. And because you want a high smoke point. In other words, oil that can take a really high heat before it starts smoking. So one place said put it in a cold oven and turn the heat up to like 500 for an hour. Another one said put it on 300 for 4 hours. There are various ways to do it, but what you're basically doing is baking the oil into the finish of the pan. So, and then the more you use it, the better it gets and the better the surface is, and it's just such a great cooking tool. But yeah, as I said, I got mine in garage sale. My son got his at garage sales. I see them at Goodwill all the time. And that's also another place to look for. My son equipped his first college kitchen, and as I said, he's a cook. He's been cooking for his whole life. He equipped his whole college kitchen at Goodwill. He just went in and kept checking in and got until he could find really great pots and pans and things. And another weird thing, I find sterling silver flatware at Goodwill all the time. They have those bins of silverware, and if you look through, there's like sterling in there sometimes for, 25 cents a piece. It's ridiculous. I love Goodwill. Yeah, that might be it. I got this great bowl there once, big glass bowl with like a 3-inch rim of sterling silver around it. And it looked awful when I got it because it was so tarnished, but it's a gorgeous bowl. And it, for a few minutes of polishing, that was $1, I think. I love Goodwill. I'm going to put a little more ginger in because I think it needs more flavor. And again, as I said, with the ginger, I said my husband doesn't like ginger. He actually likes things that have ginger in them as long as he doesn't see me putting the ginger in. And so it's more the concept of ginger, or if I use too much. Teriyaki sauce is his favorite seasoning in the entire world. Well, that has a ton of ginger in it. So, and you can use powdered ginger, but I love I love ginger in just about everything. But the fresh, you just get these knobs at any grocery store, and as I said, they will last forever in your freezer. You don't have to do anything. They say peel it before you grate it. Whatever. I sometimes do, I sometimes don't. I don't think it really matters that much. When you're cooking anything like stock, there are 2 ways to think of heat when you're cooking. If you want to seal in flavor, like when I made the chicken for this, you start with high heat and you put your chicken or whatever in, and that seals in the flavor. If you want to extract flavor, like with broth, where you want the flavor to go in the liquid and not to remain in your solids, then you start with cold. And the cold will let the flavor come out into your liquid. So an easy way to remember, broth always cold, start cold. Yeah. I think these might be ready. Laura, you want to taste? Those are clean. Yeah. And it might be hot. Careful. Does it need anything? Okay. Hey, will you pass this around? Just that I'm going to pass around the ginger. It's come on in. It's if you haven't seen fresh ginger before, smell it. It smells so good. Oh, and yeah, I also made apple crisp because oatmeal is a great inexpensive thing too. I love oatmeal in the morning, but again, my husband loves those packets with all the seasoning in them. I don't want that. So I use just, your basic cheap regular oats, and I cook with a little half milk, half water, and then I throw in frozen blueberries and heat that through. And it's just so easy and so delicious. So this is apple crisp that I made. I actually made a couple different batches. This one that I'm sharing with you is from fresh apples, peeled, chopped up. The recipe's in there too. The topping is a lot of oats, just basic old dollar store oats. But I added dried cranberries in here too. I also made this with canned fruit, which I had never done before. I mean, apple crisp is something I've made a million times, but I'd never made it with canned fruit, but I made it with canned pears and with the cranberries in there. It was really good. And so if you happen to have a lot of canned fruit, this is a good way to do it. I don't, with the canned fruit, I didn't put, I put very little sugar even in the topping because the fruit was so sweet on its own. And I like apple crisp not too sweet. We used to eat it for breakfast. Although my husband said, well, I hope you're serving whipped cream with that, and I'm not. I'm sorry. It is good with whipped cream or ice cream, but it's good on them. But crisp is a really easy way to use up fruit. It's I like adding something to the just apples or whatever. You can, as I said, I've got apples and cranberries are great. Blueberries and pears are a really good combo. Peaches and raspberries are a great combo. And those berries, the other fruit, add a little tanginess that makes it more interesting. And with the topping, I usually put a bunch of chopped nuts in there. I like that too. I didn't this time, kept it nut-free, but that can be really great too. My mom just uses softened butter and flour and sugar, which is delicious, but I like the texture of the oatmeal as well as the health. It's a little healthier with that. And it's such an easy and flexible thing to make for a crowd. You can throw it in the oven. It's fine room temperature. It's great warm. It's great cold. I once made it for a brunch. I had brunch for maybe 20 people. And I had all these dishes, and I threw in an apple crisp in the oven just as we sat down for the rest of it. And everybody stayed all day, and we had a great time and drank mimosas. And then as they were leaving, I realized, oh, the apple crisp is still in the oven. And it had been in for about 3 hours, and I pulled it out and it was still good. Everybody's going. I ran out on my balcony and said, you forgot the crisp. Come back. So it's a very flexible dish. Here, this keeps turning.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, off. There you go. But, and in apple season, where you can get apples really cheaply, it's a really good way to do things too. I'm not that much of an applesauce fan, but this stuff I love. Here, I can probably help you with that too. Do we have questions, comments? Yes.
Going back to the broth,
Mm-hmm.
the celery leaves
Yes.
add a lot of flavor, and then also in the summer I put my celery leaves in a salad.
Yes.
You can mix in a lot of things, your stems,
Yep.
your parsley, and
Yeah.
anything.
I love celery leaves. I use them in lots of things. And when I buy celery at the grocery store, I always make sure that I get a set that has a lot of leaves that are very green, because that's my favorite part. I like that better than the actual celery. And I got celery plants at Turner's the last 2 summers, and they grew really, really well, and mostly leaves, you know, not as much of the stalk, but mostly leaves. And the idea was, Tara Turner said that the idea was to use it as an herb. And so I had that all summer, and I love celery leaves, great flavor and all sorts of things. Yes, that would be great. And we have a couple staff members who have to be gluten-free for health reasons. That's an excellent idea. Yes, and I need to learn more about it, because I'm thinking, oh, we forgot the chips. Yeah. Yes. Hold on, let me wipe this off. There you go. And we were talking about doing a class on healthy eating, you know, fads versus healthy stuff too, which I would like to do. If I do that, I'm going to do it in conjunction with a nutritionist, so that, you know, I have the right idea. We talked about doing a romantic foods class. Yeah, I think Sweetheart Day or whatever is in October. I don't have time to put together a class for Valentine's Day, but we talked about doing something like that. That would be really fun. And I had the idea of doing just the beginning ideas of, I'm thinking stinky foods class, of things that are used in very tiny amounts that you taste terrible by themselves but add a lot of flavor, like fish sauce. Fish sauce is a cheap condiment that's in all sorts of Asian cooking, but you add a couple drops and it adds an enormous amount of flavor. By itself, it's disgusting. Anchovy paste. Anchovy paste is another one. It's great in things. You don't know, it doesn't taste fishy. You'd use a little, because that's what's in Caesar salad dressing, you know. But I am never going to eat a whole anchovy on my own, but a little anchovy paste is amazing. Blue cheese, a lot of people don't like blue cheese, but a little bit of blue cheese in things can be really good. So I was thinking it might be kind of fun to do a class along those lines. Foods that are kind of strange on their own, but add a lot of flavor. Yeah, yeah. And, you know, that it does make a big difference, those things that just add a huge amount of flavor. All right, do we have any other questions? Any other class requests? Because we're putting together a list and we don't have everything. We're aiming for every month, maybe once a month. We'll see. But now we're every month. Yeah, yeah. But if you have any other requests for things, I may do a crock pot class. The food pantry asked me to do a crock pot class, so we may do that, because it is such a useful tool. But there are little tips. Never put frozen meat in there. I said this at the last class I did. Never put frozen meat in there and then come home to eat it at the end of the day, because the crock pot cooks. You can do that in your Instant Pot when you're under pressure, because it's going to go from frozen to cooked really fast. Here, it's going to spend a long time in the danger zone, which is food that is between 40 degrees and 140 degrees is only safe for a short amount of time, which is why we refrigerate leftovers right away, why we quick cool the stock and things. And in a crock pot, if you put in frozen meat, it's going to be cooked at the end of the day, but it will have spent a long time in that danger zone, so it may not be safe to eat. So there are little tips like that.
What does it do to it?
Food that is between, if it's warmer than 40 degrees is basically what your refrigerator is at, but cooler than 140 degrees is safe for maybe 2 hours, in that range. And if it's summer, really hot out, maybe an hour. And because the crock pot cooks at such a low temperature, it's going to stay in that range for a very long time. And
How warm is it on hot
I don't think it's more than 300 degrees. I want to say maybe even 250.
how about like low?
Pardon?
How about if it's on low?
There would be even lower, like maybe 150, 175. I could look it up.
Just above the other ways.
Yeah. So you don't, yeah, that's dangerous to leave things in there that way. But there's a ton of food, so if anyone wants more, please come have some. I never know how many people are coming, so I cook for a crowd. And our staffers will get some too. Yeah. Or you can come up and talk to me and get some. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. Uh-huh. Thank you.
Be sure to watch the library website and the calendars for that.
Yep. The waffle one is going to be a blast. It really is. We're having a lot. I keep coming in and saying, I made this in the waffle maker. Yes, yes. Oh, so much fun. And for the Instant Pot, my favorite cookbook is called How to Instant Pot, because it not only has great recipes, but this guy, he checks everything ahead of time. He's really thorough, and he tells you exactly why you're doing things certain ways. With something like the Instant Pot, that's really important. And he also did our Will It Waffle cookbook, my favorite. And he did a cast iron cookbook. So this guy is now my favorite writer.
There's cookbooks in the back. And,
Yep.
For checkout too, if you want to browse those.
And don't forget to check out the exhibit room. Oh, there's it's about money and for kids, but there's an artist who makes portraits out of money. They're extraordinary and evidently illegal, but they're really cool. You're not supposed to cut up money, but they're just amazing. You need to look at those. They're really great. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.